terms of archive and say, oh shit, Matt said something genius. What was it again? And then we can rewind, you see, to the section and grab it. So thanks, Jim, for pressing record. Matt Joss was just saying hi to everyone and introducing himself, because he doesn't have to do that when you were on the call, and explaining that how much he digs the conference. Perhaps I could ask you to say hi as well, and your role in the scheme of things, and then we can have a quick round table. Try and keep it quick so that we can get into the meat of things. That would be fantastic.
Sure. So my name is Matt Pruitt. I'm the president of Radical Exchange Foundation, and my background is as a lawyer. I practiced law for between 4 and 5 years before getting involved in for a relatively short period of time, like advising a blockchain investing group, and then finding my way to Radical Exchange through that. And the sort of short story of how I got interested in these ideas is that as I was studying, I quickly saw like the promise and the interestingness of blockchain technology in this idealistic sense, in the same way that a lot of people did. But I realized that we were going to need a much deeper understanding of mechanism design if we were going to turn these tools into things that actually help people collaborate effectively, and that help people make felicitous decisions instead of just becoming some new form of some new kind of dysfunctional digital economy. So those questions led me to read the book Radical Markets, which brought together a lot of different interests for me. And I did a little bit of my own writing about it, and started working with Glenn, which led to us organizing this conference that went off 2 weeks ago in Detroit. And we're now forging ahead with Radical Exchange as an organization, which we hope will advance this this set of ideas in all kinds of ways. So I hope that maybe that's too fast. Do you guys have enough background in sort of what we're up to that makes sense?
Yeah, that's perfect, Matt. I did brief the guys before about the Radical Exchange community, and I'm sure more than a few of us here may have read the book. So that's Great. Awesome. Thank you very much. So 20 seconds or less, otherwise we'll get to half past the hour and we'll still be introducing ourselves, if that's okay. Christina?
Let me unmute. See if my internet connection will work. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Christina. I'm a knowledge ecologist, so I have a background in wetland ecology. I'm very interested in how organizations and communities set up their structures and processes to allow or not allow coherent information flows that people can make sense of and make decisions on effectively. I'm very interested in economics as a system, since it really hasn't been treated as a complex system science. And I'll stop there.
That was 20 seconds. It's like you were timing it. Thank you for that. Jim, would you like to step up to the mic, sir?
Sure. Retired information physicist wannabe in a lot of radical changing technologies, and I'm hoping we get, each of these communities has something done really, really well, and looking for ways that they can come together and do something better together. And I'm hoping, I'm looking for ways to cooperate with Radical Exchange.
Thank you very much, Jim. I love the way you didn't dwell on your fantastic resume, but just talked about the future. That's very characteristic. Michael.
Michael, Vancouver Island, West Coast, community currencies, which are the money that knows no rival, non-rivalrous money. That's my bag. Thank you.
A thought leader in open money and all that stuff. Still learning from the master. Thank you, Michael. Eric.
Yeah, hi. I'm a solution architect, and I'm interested in decentralized web technologies and the advantages they provide, especially in educational settings. And Matt, I am interested in, like, if your legal background is helping you in this role.
Cheers, Governor. Thank you very much. Roy?
Right, okay. 30-year admin, tech speciality, increasingly involved in distributed asynchronous communities like this one, much like Christine, interested in how they're evolving, developing, the utilities that are supporting them, the conversations that are there engendering. In this specific context, I was an advisor to an early blockchain, community blockchain, an early ICO pillar, which some of you may or may not know. That's pretty much me. Hopefully that was less than 20 seconds.
Thanks, Roy. Actually, I'll go next because I'm going to pass to Joachim, who will just introduce himself and then probably do a screen share because that's what Joachim does. I'm currently working with the Akasha Foundation, founded by Mihai Alisi, a co-founder with Vitalik of Ethereum. We're trying to work out how to put Ethereum technologies and similar technologies to good use. Glenn invited me to respond to the Data is Labour chapter in the book, if only because I didn't entirely agree with it, which is very nice of him then to invite my response, and that's now available on the Radical Exchange Medium publication. And over to Joachim to introduce and to kick off talking about cooperation as a service, I hope. At least, Joachim, if you are expecting to lead that presentation.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yay! That's good. Love it when a plan comes together. Thanks, mate.
All right. So I'm Joachim Stroh. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, sunny Brooklyn, New York today. I'm a technologist, always trying to bridge the gap between technology and business. I have a background in computer science and business. Worked in consulting, HR consulting for many years, and specialized in knowledge management, a field where you start to connect the different islands of information in organizations. Still do organizational design work today in a group called Change Agents Worldwide, and also do some of these experimental things, bringing people into online spaces, and see how we can work together in teams on new technologies, always sort of co-creating and co-evolving and looking at positive technologies in this space, right? Technologies that support our work and the future of work. So in that context, Philip mentioned cooperation as a service. Is one of the bigger topics here at the collective, as well as something called social ledger that I've been working on for a few months, years. I don't know. It's a kind of rethinking of how, when we work together in these online spaces, we can recognize our work. Right? How can we sort of begin to look at our interactions in this space rather than just looking at that from a transactional perspective, right? And record some of these rather financial transactions. So that's my task here. I want to keep this as open as possible today and see where we want to take this conversation. We can certainly start with cooperation as a service, or what the collective is doing, or what your interest is here from you guys, Joss and Matt, right?
I think I would love to hear a little bit more about what the collective is doing.
That's cool. Maybe, Philip, do you want to give an overview of where you came from?
Sure. I think it's fair to say that 2.5 years ago, a bunch of us got really quite annoyed with the state of technology, the internet and the web, and how it wasn't quite going to the original architect's plan. So we thought, well, this boils down to trustworthiness. If we can't trust our technology, we can't trust ourselves, as we've seen with filter bubbles and the like. And if we can't trust ourselves, we can't trust each other, which is not a great basis on which to build productive, healthy societies. So we did set ourselves the original ambition of defining the criteria for ascertaining whether a technology is trustworthy or not, before waking up to the fact that, boy, that is a stupidly complex problem to try and crack. If only because it's a complex adaptive system. So cause and effects aren't Newtonian. I don't need to explain it more to you chaps, I can tell. But nevertheless, we were founded as a cooperative because we wanted to cooperate on understanding how technologies can help people cooperate. So as Joachim mentioned, the cooperation as a service and the social ledger work is one of, I guess, 3 major prongs for the collective at the moment. The second one is understanding complex adaptive systems by mapping them. And I'm looking around the people on this call here, and obviously Christina has been core to that in her work as a knowledge ecologist. So we've worked with the Internet Archive, for example, in understanding the decentralization or the re-decentralization community so that they can work more productively together, identifying where the gaps are, but equally not spending time reinventing the wheel. And the third prong relates to the post that I responded to Data as Labour with, which is understanding where we might take personal data next, or PII as it's sometimes known in the US, to become something that's more living on the edge rather than at nodes, something that's more natural than legal, something for which, if we asked a market to put a price on it, it wouldn't do the value of that data anywhere near the respect that it could. So it's a different way of understanding how data flows through networks, and one we think closely linked to the founding purpose of the collective. There are just over 200 members. We just make progress every week. We're not looking for a hockey stick here, although we do have one member who does think we're going to get 1 billion members of the cooperative at some point. I love his enthusiasm. We're just looking to do good stuff, and through that good stuff attract people who share our values and share our purpose, and want to put $10 a year in the kitty and help make it happen. Christina.
I just want to add that I've felt really welcomed since finding the team that turned into the collective, because of the awareness of not just using very tech to a non-developer, how to wrangle some of these questions and begin to think about it. So we really do try and keep, although there are very techie folks and very techie conversations come up, to keep some of the conversations really open to, like, what is it like to recognize trustworthy technology if you're a muggle and you don't have those wizarding powers.
Yeah, this is a multidisciplinary undertaking, just in the same way that Radical Exchange has to be, because without all of those disciplinary lenses, we'll miss something. The challenge, of course, is if you have an organization with a payroll that's multidisciplinary, getting them to do wonderful things together is challenging enough. Now, forget a payroll, distribute them around the world in different time zones and different cultures, and well, it's a challenge, but one that we hope to do our part in resolving for ourselves, dog fooding it, as I understand the Americans like to call it, for some reason I haven't yet understood. But anyway, and if we can do it for ourselves, and we can work with the likes of Radical Exchange, if we can work with the likes of Team Human that Douglas Rushkoff's working on, the Bateson Institute, we've got about 5 or 6 conversations with communities who don't want to go to the Facebook in order to organise themselves, because it's counter their values, counter everything that they hold dear. Things like Slack don't scale because it's $80 per user per annum, and you can't. That might work in an organisational context, but not for a corporation of distributed folks volunteering. No one wants to pay that bill. So, can we find something in between Facebook and these proprietary services and the free services that just fall over as soon as somebody puffs on them. Can we get an integrated set of services together that just make sense and are really cost effective because we're all trying to cooperate on them together as opposed to separately? Does that answer your question, Matt?
Absolutely, yeah. So when you talk about cooperation as a service, are you guys building things?
Joachim.
We are, yes. So yeah, let me take a step back. What Philip just said is very important. So we have both sort of an academic and a practical focus, an applied focus, right? So academics is more like building these communities of interest around technology we trust, right? So we explore into identity things, into authentication, into diverse participation and all the good stuff that we want to work around in this collective. But then we also have this stronger practical focus, and this is where you get into we want to actually build some of these technologies for ourselves, but more importantly for organizations that join us. Right, so we figure out certain patterns. I love patterns. I don't know if you know John Kelton's conversation community. He's deep into sort of pattern recognition and gathering these patterns and applying them into certain context. So what we've done here is really look at certain technologies, mostly open source, obviously, right? That we are gathering and using them on a shared platform. Right. So we've used them internally, and more importantly, we also developed some protocols around that platform. So it's really about how to use these technologies, not just get it and then have fun and use it, but more so how does it enable sort of the co-creation of things here in the collective, right? How do you bring people on board? How do you align the different thinking here? And I've been working, done some work here with governance processes too. So, a larger group of people, how can we begin to align our thinking and move towards a common or shared goal, right? And so that's sort of the very important practical aspects that goes into this cooperation as a service model, right? So both the interest of the community, but also the sort of community of impact. So you actually get into a space where you begin to build stuff. So it's not only a community where you have good conversations, you have that too, but more importantly, you break it up into sort of work teams and people having certain skill sets and certain ideas on how to move this forward, and then apply their skills inside the collective. And so we've built this. Let me show you some screens here, if that's okay. Give you a better idea of where we're coming from. So this is something we put on top of sort of the different services we offer, sort of an entry point that we currently putting together for new members. It's a portal-like structure that is showing you the different tools and spaces we're using across the collective, and one of the things we started early on is thinking in terms of sociocratic principles. So that's kind of, for me, a different way of organizational design and thinking how to work together in separate, decentralized groups, right? Rather than having a pyramidal structure, right, with a top-down command line or a board of directors that makes certain decisions. We decided early on to say, hey, we're sort of much more organic. So we recognize there's some interest groups here, right? And we want to break it down into circles that kind of self-manage, self-maintain. They decide what to do inside these different groups. So one of the big notions of sociocracy is pushing stuff to the edges, right? So do the work where it belongs, and then they can make their decisions as much as possible. And only if it bubbles up to the entire collective, right? So then you get into a more elaborate governance process where you want to involve other people in the decision-making process, right? So that's been our mantra here, and we're building this, the big ops circle here is an important one, obviously, to start, looking at the different functions inside the collective, who's doing what in terms of public engagement, agile operations, governance structures, and so forth. But also to look at the members and how can we map sort of the skills and the different interests that they bring into the collective that's a bigger topic we've been following too. So here's a simple network mapping thing, where we encourage new members to join us. Here's Philip, and tell us about their skill sets, right? So only again as a feedback mechanism to say, hey, this is where we are, this is how we are connected, and can we apply now your skill sets into the existing projects that we're following, right? So Philip mentioned his 3 bigger projects, and how can you become more active in the collective? And notice, some of these circles have these dotted lines. That means it's a new member. So here's Will Fisher, joined 2 days ago, right? Here's Colin Kilburn, joined 9 days ago. So onboarding and bringing people into the collective is a very important task. And depending on what the skill sets are and what they want to do, are they more of a contributor, or are they more of a supporter, standing bystander, right? Lurking and learning thing. Or are they actively involved? Are they wanting to get actively involved in these things? So we want to pay attention to that and build these skill sets, right? So you can actually, let me see, go in here and sort of set up your profile. That's information that we could use again internally for seeing where we're heading and where some of these skill sets are needed in the collective, right? So that's one thing I wanted to show you so quickly. The other thing is we're using Mattermost as our chat conversation tool, right? So we have different channels in chat and Chattermost, Mattermost, where we have our conversations, right? And that tool nicely breaks up into these what they call teams, or we call it domains actually. For DigLife. So there's a main domain with all the typical channels you find in these kind of tools, right? But we want to break it down into a structure that's more aligned with what we're doing in terms of projects, operations, and partners. So partners is the big one we're working on that moves us towards more of this model of corporation as a service. And to give you a quick overview of what that looks like, so since I like a lot organizational design, we've been thinking about these 21st century CAS elements. What again, this goes back to sort of pattern recognition and what are the important pieces that make up a good organization, right? And this model is broken down into these different segments here. Just to pick a few, obviously an important one is conversational elements, right? So what are things that enable conversations inside an organization like this, right? Obviously, chat is a big one, but more so like programmable chats. How do you actually integrate bots or webhooks into these channels and make some use of these technologies? Calls and cognition is a way to initiate these video conferencing calls, but again, more so to provide some feedback loops into the conversation, into the real-time conversation, in terms of who has talked, who hasn't said something, what has been said. So a lot of interesting things are going on. If you give you one example, Robert Best, who is a member, recently looked at a new open source video conferencing tool called Big Blue Button. That's very promising for us to eventually replace the Zoom conferencing tool. And yesterday, Jim actually just sent me another tool called Otter today, which does transliteration. So taking the conversation and then putting that into text form using an AI backend. Fascinating stuff that you can embed in these real-time conversations. It's just another element that supports, again, it supports sort of us being in these spaces, right? It's not we, subverting, using these technologies is stuff that we're going to use to support the conversations we have. And that list goes on and on, right? In terms of notes and wikis. Give an example for these notes thingies here. We're using a tool called CodMD, where we're starting to gather some of these patterns. We mentioned development protocols. Here's a binder protocol. So this is a very nice tool that moves us away from Google Docs, right? So no longer using Google for this, but rather something more lightweight, open source, and something again that we can start to share. People can learn this markdown language here, and use these lightweight tools, with the notion of, it's a learning environment, right? So you understand what this is and the capabilities you have, and we can expand that also to the development environment, right? So most recently we looked at ways to use some of these online editing environments to do some co-creation in development spaces. Here's a view into the development team. We're looking to create a new version of our website, and we're going to use plain HTML5 for that, and we have a team working on this, making these edits inside this online shared environment. Again, we can have multiple editors in this shared coding environment, and previewing that on a staging website, and then eventually rolling that out as a new tool. Again, this is a sort of a bundle of services that we want to offer to our members and to other organizations who join us, with the idea of recognizing simple patterns here that they can now adopt, use for their own needs, right? And build their own tools and tool sets, right? And we would just sort of collect these patterns. That's, I think, the role I see for the collective is gathering more and more of these patterns that make sense, that support human development, positive technology, good protocols, good principles, and we can go deeper and deeper into this once we become more familiar with these elements, right? Just to give you an idea. Philip mentioned Nora Bateson, right? Her institute. She looks at something called warm data, opposite of obviously cold data, data that's extracted from us and being used in different ways. Warm data is a way, again, to circle back to create a feedback loop, a cognitive feedback loop back to the members and say, hey, there's some new connections here, there's some new discovery. Let's use that, inside our group, inside our organization, and eventually share that across other groups out there. So that's kind of the model we're putting together here, right? With these different areas of exploration of again, let me show you this one again here, because it's this dual focus on what are the challenges out there, right? What are the different areas we want to nurture, have good conversations in these interest groups. But on the other side, the practical application of that stuff. So we actually have projects running, and we have these work teams now. If you're familiar with Harold Jarkey's network learning chart, so he breaks it down into networks, communities, and work teams. Right. So the work teams are the ones that are most purpose-oriented, goal-oriented. They want to get stuff done. So this kind of cooperation, we want to support that as a service here, right? But cross-link that with the different activities. That's important to stay close to these different challenges that are out there, and bring them into the collective, and maybe turn that into another service, or a better way, an extension of an existing service. So there are many ways to do that. And it's an exploration, really, right? That's important to us. It's not a ready off-the-shelf platform, right? We don't want to rebuild, recreate something that's already out there. Rather, have a collection of these different patterns and services and technologies, put them under one umbrella, and then use that as a foundation, as a platform that others can use, and begin also to sort of cross-fertilize. So if an organization joins us, they may have an open protocol to say, yes, other members are welcome to join our collective, our community, and we begin to exchange some information, right? Let me give you an example. We have a member, Les, I think he's not on the call today, who is deep into permaculture, right? He is in the UK, and he has many connections into what the permaculture collective and communities are doing. And they'd be very interesting in doing something, in terms of sharing their knowledge and sharing their patterns, right? I mean, permaculture, there are hundreds, thousands of patterns out there. And what we would try to do here with our platform is support that, give them a space, give them a kind of a home base, right, from where they can operate within the collective, but then be able to sort of spread their knowledge and exchange their ideas and thinking among other participants here, right? And it's something we all explore, and it's with of course with the notion of this is technology we trust. So we built these trusted spaces with technology we trust that we've vetted, that we looked at critically, and offer that to the members so they can build on top of that and create other things and other tool sets that we all benefit from. So I'll stop here. That was a lot of stuff, I think.
Very cool.
Back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, there's so much to respond to and talk about there. You guys have obviously done amazing thinking and amazing work. I'd love to, figure out how we can, I guess my first thought is I'd love to figure out how we can experiment with the tools you've built in organizing the radical exchange movement, and then secondly, the work you're doing is obviously very resonant with what we're doing, and so in a more general sense, I'd love to figure out how we can continue to collaborate with you guys and figure out how we can work towards common purposes in general.
It's funny that there are a number of principles underpinning what it means to be a cooperative, and one that actually is perhaps the most neglected amongst cooperatives is the principle of cooperation between cooperatives.
Yeah.
It really sounds like something that you shouldn't have to repeat to cooperatives, but it doesn't necessarily manifest itself, perhaps because this connective fabric didn't exist until recent years. And so not only are we trying to cooperate with other cooperatives or other cooperative-like movements, but we're just trying to seed this so that there can be this cross-fertilization between these movements without us having done anything else other than provide this cooperative platform in the first place. All of the groups that we've mentioned excite me individually, but even more so in combination, because we need each other. There is so much to do in the world that to try and do it in our own little community silos, to me, just misses a massive trick. It's not dog fooding. We have to, if one group puts in an hour of a person's work into this kind of infrastructure, that should not just benefit that community, but all of the other ones involved as well. It just seems such an obvious thing to embark upon. And I was very interested in attending the conference in Detroit, if only because from a distance, perhaps it's the name of the book, right? It mentions markets. And when you mention markets, you think capitalism. And so when I rocked up, I was thinking, okay, this is going to be interesting to get the tenor of what's going on here, because I'm not against competition. When it's treated equally alongside cooperation, that's a wonderful combination. And I was thinking, I wonder how much these guys are going to be mentioning, things that previously may have been accused of in North America of being a bit, socialist, a bit pinky or something, or pinko or whatever the phrase might be, which is a bonkers label, when actually this cooperative mechanism is the only way we're going to respond as a species to the biggest challenges in the world. End of. Right? So it's about time we got over ourselves and just made it happen. And speaking from myself as someone immersed in the collective, but also now having had the experience in Detroit, I just want to get cooperating. I mean, that's the long and short of it. There would be we would be slightly remiss if we didn't mention money, because despite our enthusiasm for open money, we still live in a society roughly run on fiat currency or rivalrous currency. So the way we've approached this at the moment with other collectives is said, look, you can't if you're going to try and do this sort of stuff for nothing, then you'll get exactly the value that you pay for. If you want to go down the proprietary route, well, even $80 per annum doesn't necessarily scale when you're trying to work like we're trying to work. And we're getting it down into around about the sort of, Joachim, correct me if I'm getting this wrong and whether your numbers have added up to something slightly different now, but we're in the order of 10 to $20 per person per annum. And the communities that we're talking to are saying, well, actually, I don't think our members would mind covering up 10, $20 per annum to be part of this community to make shit happen. So we're trying to, and of course, as we grow, we might get new economies of scale, but we're just trying to work out how this model pays for itself as smart as we can be, and as much as we volunteer to make it happen. There are still unavoidable costs. It's yeah. Does that make sense? It would be unfair of me not to mention that there is this inevitable cost element to it, and in some instances, some groups are saying, well, okay, we have a membership fee, and we'll just incorporate in that, and you can collect the membership fee for us as well. So I don't know. Anyway, I've brought it up now. That was the one thing I just had in my mind to round off after Joachim took us through that walkthrough.
Makes perfect sense, and I appreciate your approach to that. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, it seems like a great set of tools. I mean, I think we'll definitely want to, you know, get a few users going so that we can, you know, explore it and figure out whether we can deploy it more broadly to all of our little local groups and the entire volunteer base. But you know, yeah, I mean, whatever the way to kind of get started exploring it is, I think we definitely want to do. Yeah, I mean, I also appreciate what you said about cooperatives cooperating, because a lot of the mental models of cooperatives have a sort of implicit assumption of a wall around the village or something. And you know, clearly we need to you know, figure out how to make that wall more permeable, at least.
Josh, do you have any comments about what you've seen, mate?
Oh, well, I didn't expect you to have such a big stack of tech. That's mighty impressive.
Yeah.
Clearly a lot of work has gone into that.
Yeah,
yeah, and I'm looking forward to trying it out. Is it just like a public sign up? We just go to the website?
Joachim, sorry, Christina as well. You're breaking up, Christina. Yeah, you're sounding a bit like a Dalek there, sorry. Joachim, can you speak to that?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So we recently, created a new protocol actually to sort of we call it the delegate partner protocol, in fact, let me just link this thing here. It's a notepad. If you go to the chat here and open this document, that's the beginning of how we think we're going to work with other organizations, because it's one thing to become a member of DigLife, right? And maybe you're not too driven towards actually exploring the tech we trust, but you rather want to see how your organization can utilize some of these services, right? And for this, we developed this thing called the Partner Delegate Protocol. So this is where you could actually try out one of the services we offer in a small group, right? And then there's some steps here to help you get started on this, where you send a few people sort of over, and we provide some of the hand-holding and introduce you to the different activities and areas that we have inside the collective, and you just get a better feel of what we're doing here, right? So it's a getting to know thing. And then from there, we can then further explore, okay, if you want to bring more people in, then some of the funding comes into play, right? How do we create the membership fees for that broader access, to more members of your organization? and then go from there. That's our current thinking on how we want to onboard other organizations like yours.
Yeah, and the question may have been more about the cooperation of which cooperation among cooperatives in the tech we're developing is open source. But becoming a member, you just go to the diglife.com site and type join us. And my experience is that if there's going to be cooperation between the cooperatives, there has to be people who are members of both cooperatives. And the collective intelligence emerges from peer-to-peer upward and gets consent across the organizations.
So I'm thinking, Matt, we should get, is it Joshua Shane? Is he the guy who's organizing the local chapters? Turned on to this. So for everyone else, the way Radical Exchange is structured, we've got this conference organizing body, but we're sort of encouraging lots of smaller groups to emerge independently. They can fly the flag, but they're not technically part of this organization for legal reasons. So I think we'd want to encourage those groups to sign up to your service.
To the point about membership of Radical Exchange, is there such a thing as being a member of the movement?
So we're not a member-based organization right now. I mean, as Josh said, we have we've got the Radical Exchange Foundation, which is sort of which is a New York nonprofit organization, and then we've got a bunch of groups, some of which are quite robust, others of which are just sort of discussion groups. Who are all around the world talking about these ideas and kind of loosely organizing. And actually, over the next couple of months, we might have a little bit more formal. We might we intend to formalize our relationships with these groups to a kind of a limited extent, basically through very limited, non-burdensome licensing type arrangement, which will still basically allow them to operate, completely independently of us. And although we nonetheless don't intend to be, we still don't intend to be a member-based organization. So there are no plans to to make everyone who is affiliated with the local groups or even with Radical Exchange Foundation like a Radical Exchange member.
Gotcha.
That isn't how we're thinking about it.
So that's interesting. So instead of a membership fee, all of which or part of which goes to cover the infrastructure costs of, like I said, about $10 a year, we would effectively be saying, if you'd like to use this infrastructure for your local chapter, your local movement under the umbrella of Radical Exchange, then we need $10 sort of tip in the hat, so to speak, to cover off the costs. And a part of that would be, I guess, a kind of like an opt-in box. Did you want to join the cooperative and therefore have a vote in the ongoing governance of this infrastructure as well? Does that? I'm just trying to work this through. I'm just talking out loud. It could be crap. It could be. It could make sense.
Well, I mean, I need to work it through too. I need to think about exactly how it would work. But I mean, my thought is initially to experiment with it as, with the Radical Exchange Foundation, which already has 40 or 50 volunteers who could use it to collaborate. And then, in terms of, and then getting it into the hands of of the local groups could take different shapes. It might mean just making it available to the local group organizers and saying, hey, if you can get the people in your local group to pitch in $10 to be on the platform, then do that. It's up to you. Or it could involve Radical Exchange Foundation subsidizing the local groups' uses of it. That's something we obviously have to think about.
Does the Radical, if you don't want to answer, of course, that's fine. I'm just interested. Does the Radical Exchange organization then have philanthropic funding, or?
Yeah. We have, for the conference, we raised money from traditional philanthropic foundations like Kauffman and Hewlett, and I don't know if you know these. I guess they're U.S. focused, but we're going to attempt to continue to do that, and also raise money from right off the bat, our fundraising focus is foundations and handful of wealthy individuals, but we also sooner rather than later hope to have more sort of broad-based support, which might involve using some of the mechanisms that we're thinking about, like the quadratic finance or liberal radicalism mechanism.
So
Sweet.
Having just gone through a little bit of the delegate protocol, it makes sense to me if you have a delegation of people who are sort of early adopters within Radical Exchange, you want to try this out, just have everybody join the collective initially and start a Radical Exchange channel in our partners domain. And then from there, we can show you the tools that are available, and we can talk about what makes sense if we were able to create a separate tile for the Radical Exchange community. That would be like your own Slack group, right? And then any local community can just make a channel for that locality. And whether to join the collective or the Radical Exchange Foundation subsidizes them, as you said, we can figure that out later. We're not going to start with a new team tile the first time. So just come in, we'll start a channel that's called Radical Exchange in our partners. That will also allow members of the collective to see and find your website and your work as well.
Okay, cool.
And if I understand it correctly, if you wanted to bring on the 50 members of the foundation for the 50 participants, it would be $10. It would be $500 a year. So I think it could provide a very good value to the.
Jim, I said to these guys we weren't selling, but I like it. Always be closing. That's what I like about you, Jim.
Okay. Not a selling directly here, but bear with me. Former ad man, etc., etc.
Don't let Jim talk to customers.
One of the other aspects that I'm most particular about trying to foment is cross-fertilization of the various social medias and the rest of it. And that's something else we're working towards fairly intensively now, is facilitating whatever comes in from members, people who come in as friends, whatever, to just, again, grow the awareness, grow this cross-fertilizing awareness of what we're all doing to different communities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another aspect that we are definitely putting time, energy, and effort into, just FYI.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Roy.
The recording in a minute.
So
yeah, that's great, mate.
My thought is to start with a small group, but then perhaps me, Joss, and a few others, to really dig in and explore it, and figure out whether it makes sense to deploy it to our whole volunteer group. Because you understand, obviously there's major friction in going from one platform to another. So we've got to I've got to have my head fully wrapped around it before we contemplate that. But it does seem
100%.
incredibly interesting. So I would love to do
So
that.
if you join the collective, we'll have a channel, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, great.
So,
One thing-
so in terms,
Can I just add that that decision of whether to just encourage everybody to join the collective because servers cost money and it's $10 a year, or to subsidize your sort of general volunteer communities, is if you do go the subsidy route and we figure out what a reasonable cost for your own team, then you have the link and you can make that as public as you like. Nobody coming in through that pathway would end up joining the collective chat spaces. So there wouldn't be as much cross-fertilization that way. But it's very much in that way, just joining a Slack team. And then the subset that are members that will get member access to something like Notepad or the Code Sandbox environment or whatever the different services. As people want to use tech tools, that's kind of an adjacent possible, and they get pulled over there as needed, rather than having to have everybody understand the collective